If you're a provider, it's our hope that you will refer clients to Legal Aid of Nebraska or recommend these classes for your clients' information and use. As with all of legal aid presentations, this is general information. It should not be taken as a substitute for legal advice for your unique situation, because everyone's situation is in fact unique. So first, we will discuss the tools and information you need to fully examine your financial situation. Second, we will show you how to use those tools to diagnose where you are financially. Third, what do we need to do with the tools and what do we need to prescribe to fix your financial situation? And then fourth, we want to keep track of all your hard work and keeping track by monitoring those finances. Let's discuss the tools and information you need to examine and fully understand your financial situation. First, we're going to give you a test. It's a self-test, so it's pretty easy, and all the answers are yes or no. Just answer them in your head, and here we go. Are you making only minimum payments on your credit cards? Are debt collectors calling you? Have you used a payday lender? Do you use credit cards to pay for necessities such as food or housing? Does the sorting out of your finances make you scared or feel out of control? If you've answered yes to 2 or more of these questions, you might be in the financial danger zone. So let's talk about the tools you need to really examine your situation. First of all, you need to gather all of your financial documents in one place. That's your pay stubs, documents of any other income information, any bills, any credit card statements, any bank statements. If you spend money for it or you spend money on it, you should have a record of it. So once you have all those documents together, you divide those into 2 piles. First pile is what I make, the second pile is what I spend. Now looking through the stack of your what I make documents, you'll fill out the handy dandy know what you make chart that we provided in your materials. Keep in mind that income is more than just wages. Income is any money or items of value that add to your ability to cover your debts. For example, do you get Section 8 housing as a help for your rent? That's income. You get SNAP benefits. That is income. Energy assistance, child support, alimony, all of those things are income. Many people these days have a side hustle. Make sure that's listed on this sheet. That's your income. Don't worry, the taxman is not going to get this sheet. He doesn't need it, but you need to have that information on your income sheet. Once you have all your income on the chart, total it up, and then to take the next step is to pick up the what I spend pile and fill out the what I spend sheet. Generally speaking, there are 2 types of expenses. There's fixed expenses and variable expenses. General rule of thumb is that fixed expenses do not change, or if they do change, it's very minimal. Think of things like rent, mortgage payments, utilities, those types of things that stay pretty constant month to month. You can't control fixed expenses. They kind of control you, but they need to be on your what I spend sheet. Then you move to the variable expenses. These are the expenses you can control. It's the money that you're spending on stuff like food, clothing, your allowance, credit card debt, etc. You then total up this sheet, and once it's all totaled, excuse me, you can diagnose your problem very quickly and very simply. Take the total amount of what you make, subtract the total amount of what you spend. This is where the rubber meets the road. If you're money to the good with a few tweaks, you should be able to live a fairly comfortable existence. If you're close to the line or your expenses outstrip your income, you may have a problem. The good news is you've now gathered and organized all of the information that you need to create a budget and get your financial life under control. A budget is telling your money where to go, not wondering where it went. I believe that deep down, everyone knows that they need a budget. I also think that everyone kind of vaguely knows what they have at any given time, and they usually keep it right up here in their head until something goes wrong. but I'm here to encourage you to put it on paper. There is something about putting a plan on paper that makes human beings stick to their plan. So if we all know that we need a budget, why is it that we don't have one? Why don't people make budgets? Well, the reasons people don't make budgets are as many and varied as well, people. So a few examples include, it's too much work. That may be true at the beginning, but the reward is so worth it. Some people tell me they don't know how. Well, one of the things this class is very broad. The next class we're hoping to put together is a specific on how to budget. Third reason, I don't make enough money to budget. The less money you make, the more important it is to budget. And finally, I hate budgets. Well, stick around and let me see if I can persuade you to embrace this process. One of my favorite excuses given to me while we were preparing this presentation was, I always think of a budget like a diet, and I never stick to a diet. But a budget is not a diet. Diets fail because they're too big an adjustment in your lifestyle. Diets are too tough, they're different, so you quit. Do not think of a budget like you think of a diet. Think of a budget as a plan, a spending plan. A budget is a plan for how you are going to spend your money. This is probably the most important slide in this presentation. Keep this in mind. It is your money. You have it. The creditor wants it. It's your choice. Do you give it to them or do you keep it to feed your family? What is your plan for your money? Stop wondering where your money went and start telling your money where to go. Think of your budget as a roadmap to get from point A, debt and anxiety, to point B, financial independence and confidence. So now that we've examined our financial situation, we have to decide what are our next steps. Many people get to this point and are distraught. They often wonder, what are my options? Do I have any? Well, I'm here to tell you, yes, you have options. These options include create and work your plan, new sources of income, negotiate your debt, debt consolidation, or bankruptcy. So let's look briefly at each of these options. First, create and work your plan. So print another blank copy of the What I Spend sheet and write down what you plan to spend on each item. Cover your necessities first, those fixed expenses I talked about, housing and utilities. And then look at your necessities that are variable, like food. Make sure that as part of your budget, you give yourself an allowance each pay period. Your allowance is your discretionary money to spend how you want. If you want to go to Starbucks and have a frap, pay for it out of your allowance. You're dying for a cinnamon Coke from Scotty's, which is a local fast food joint here in Scottsbluff, pay for it out of your allowance. You know, you could just save your allowance to get another big ticket item, but you get the idea. Every dollar in your budget has a job to do. So put it to work doing the job that you designate for it. This plan is your creation, and now you need to commit to it and work your plan. You got this. Let's talk for a second about new sources of income. Assuming you have the time and inclination, you can take on a part-time job. There are many side hustles out there. One of my favorite side hustles was something that completely caught me off guard. My wife and I had been giving a lot of stuff to the Goodwill. We're empty nesters now and had to get rid of a lot of the kids' stuff. And some of the stuff we gave away was furniture. Well, someone went to Goodwill, bought our furniture, cleaned it up, and sold it on Facebook. I found out about it because our area is fairly small and the item popped up on my Facebook feed. She was selling it for $75 and within a half hour had it marked sold. There are all kinds of legal ways to make money. Folks in our area sell enchiladas and tamales by the dozen. Several burrito shops in town started as a guy with a cooler walking in and selling burritos to workers and businesses. You are only hampered by your imagination and the law. You can negotiate your debt. Remember, again, it's your money. The debt collector wants it, but if the debt collector pushes too hard and you take bankruptcy, the debt collector gets nothing. Hence, half a loaf of bread is better than none. Always remember, the job of that collector is to prey on your emotions and your shame, to wheedle your money out of your pocket and into theirs. The phrase, there's one more phrase I want you to consider, and that is offering compromise. This is one of those fancy legal term of arts. That's what the lawyers call them, term of art. I will pay you X dollars to have that debt go away. Now, be prepared. Should you make an offer in compromise, that debt collector may accept it. And if they do, you better be prepared to pay it. Interestingly enough, in this scenario, you are doing what a debt consolidator does, but you're doing it for free. And speaking of debt consolidation, you generally have two options when talking about consolidating your debt. That's assuming you don't have a rich relative to loan the money to you to take care of it. But option number one, you can get a personal loan from a bank or credit union. Advantage is you'll be dealing with one creditor and one payment. You have someone to talk with face to face if you run into a problem. Typically, there's less impact on your credit score. One of the big disadvantages is that over time, you may pay more than you would be paying if you were paying each creditor as you went. And you'll probably need some collateral. The main thing is if you've taken all the spending documents and income documents and you put together a good package, you have something to show a banker that you're working really hard to get that done. The second option, debt consolidation companies, also allow you to get one payment to them and then they do the work. The disadvantage is they charge fees for their work. You are still on the hook for the debt. It's not their debt. They're not buying your debt. They're just helping you deal with your debt. If they miss a payment, guess what, folks? That debt falls right back in your lap. There are many disreputable companies out there that will take your money and run. They will overpromise and they will underdeliver. They could impact your credit adversely because charge-offs will appear on your credit report as they negotiate down your debt. You'll also need to close credit cards, which will also negatively affect your credit score. If you decide to use a debt consolidator, make sure you do your research. And after you've finished your research them some more. And after you've looked at it some more, it never hurts to look at them one more time. Then finally, we want to talk about bankruptcy. And bankruptcy should be your final option. It's true that bankruptcy gives you a fresh start, but it's not without problems, and it may not be the best choice for you. So let's do a quick rundown of some of the questions you need to ask yourself to determine if bankruptcy is right for you. Are there other realistic options to dealing with my debt? Go back and review your plan and your circumstances and see if there's another option. Back in my younger days, we had a group of friends. We got together every Friday night for Friday Night Club after a week of work. And one night, one of our friends just wasn't there, and we didn't know where she'd gone, and we hadn't seen her. For almost 2 years, she disappeared on us. One Friday, she walks into the local establishment where we had Friday Night Club. Big smile on her face. She ordered a drink, she sat down, and we were also excited to see her and find out where she'd been and what had been going on. And the jokes flew about, prison and other things. But what ultimately came to it was she had woken up one Saturday morning and decided that her finances were out of control. So she took 2 years away, and having a drink with us on Friday night wasn't in her budget. 2 years later, she had negotiated some of her debt. She'd consolidated some of her debt, but 2 years and she was completely out of debt. She owned everything except for the payment on her house, and she figured she's going to have that paid off in 2 years. She was very proud of the fact that she was able to do all that without taking bankruptcy. But she sat down and looked at all her realistic options. I clicked once too quick there. So if your expenses outstrip your income and you can't massage your plan to get right side up, bankruptcy may very well be the best choice to get you upright with the world. Third question you should ask is, how much debt do I have? Bankruptcy, as you'll find later, is only available to you in very limited circumstances. If you take it when you only have $5,000 to $10,000 in debt, you might not be doing yourself a favor. Bankruptcy should be saved for when your debt is so far down, you just can't figure out a way to get out of it, and it's so high that you'll be dead before you can ever get it paid off. Those are the kinds of things you look for in bankruptcy. If you owe about $5,000, $10,000, go back up to the top and try to figure out some realistic options to get back on top of the world. The type of debt you have is also very important. Is it student loan debt? Now, the good news is student loan debt right now is in flux. We don't know what's going to happen to it over the next 60 days or 100 days. We're learning more and more. It used to be kind of a general given that you couldn't discharge a student loan in bankruptcy. That's not necessarily the case anymore. There have been some inroads legally to help you with that. If that's the bulk of your debt, you should definitely talk to an attorney at Legal Aid if you qualify, or another attorney to see if you might be able to get rid of some of that student debt. If you have medical debt and it's very, very high, that's something that you really should consider. But more importantly, you should consider this. You need to anticipate, do I have more medical needs or treatment due in the future? Here's the problem. Up to this point, let's say you've accumulated $100,000 in medical debt. Well, that's a lot of money. That's probably the right time to be looking at possibly taking bankruptcy, getting a fresh start. But if over the next 6 months, you're going to have chemotherapy, you're going to have other therapies, you may have to have dialysis, it may not make sense to do that bankruptcy now, because 6 months from now, you'll have a whole nother stack of medical bills to pay. So again, that's something that an attorney can sit down and help you figure out and talk to you about. The final thing that you should consider is, are you judgment proof? What that means to an attorney is, I can't collect my debt from you because you don't have the ability for me to collect anything. A great example is a person who's on Social Security. Social Security can only be garnished for very specific purposes, such as child support or past due taxes. In some limited circumstance, it can also be attached for student loans, but that's a limited circumstance. It cannot be garnished for anything else. So if your only source of income is Social Security, there's really no point in taking a bankruptcy because nobody can get that money anyway. Sometimes taking the bankruptcy is just there to give you a peace of mind and make the creditors quit calling, but there's other ways to do that. So let's assume you've taken the bankruptcy. Here's the thing, caution, here be dragons. You can only file bankruptcy once every 7 years. When I was a kid, we played Monopoly a lot. And you always liked to get the get out of jail free card because you could use it when you needed to. But it only came through that deck every once in a while. So you had to use it wisely. So make sure that bankruptcy is the same way. The other thing is, after you file for bankruptcy, you will receive credit card offers. It's shocking, I know, but you'd be surprised how many people's credit scores actually go up after they've taken a bankruptcy. When you get those offers, tear them up, throw them away. Don't even give them a second thought. Because if you fall into that trap, which it's easy to do because old habits die hard. You have a fresh start. You've created a plan. Now work your plan. People do not plan to fail. They fail to plan. But you've done all the work. You have a spending plan, also known as a budget. And you are working with the spending plan. One day you're walking through the store, something catches your eye. Stop. Ask yourself, is this in my budget? If not, don't succumb to the pressure of the moment. Do you have allowance to buy it? Will you have any allowance left after you buy it? Do you need it or do you just want it? When you pay your bills this month, revisit your budget and see if you can budget for that item next month. Keep in mind, good things come to those who wait, and continue to work your plan. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation. Presentation, as I said earlier, is for general information, should not be taken as a substitute for legal advice for your unique situation. And believe you me that every situation I've dealt with is a unique one. What may be good for one person ain't so good for another. So before we go to the questions, I want to tell you a little bit more about Legal Aid and what we do. So Legal Aid of Nebraska, we provide civil legal services for low-income individuals to ensure that all Nebraskans have access to quality legal assistance regardless of their ability to pay. We do this in 8 offices around the state. serving all 93 counties to ensure that everyone in Nebraska has equal access to justice. If you need help with a civil legal matter such as housing problems, family matters, debt problems, or other assistance with government benefits, you can reach us at 1-877-250-2016, or you can reach us online at www.legalaidofnebraska.org. Kendra, I think we're ready for some questions.
Thank you. I had to unmute myself. Thank you for that information, Mike. So we actually got several questions in prior to the presentation during registration. And one of the questions that we have right here is that in the event of a death due to COVID, does that debt of the deceased person fall upon the family?
And this is one of my favorite lawyer answers. It depends. A lot of it depends on the relationship of the individual who passed to the individuals who are left. For example, if mom passes but dad's still alive, dad would be responsible for mom's bills. If dad's gone already and mom dies, the kids are not responsible for those bills. Mom's estate might be, but then the question is there any estate to get to? So if you're faced with that situation, it's worth making a phone call to the access line and seeing what your situation specifically is. Generally speaking, again, if you're married to the person who's passed, you're going to be responsible, but if you're not, you're probably not going to be responsible, regardless of the people who will push you to pay those bills.
Another question is, can you give us more information on how to file a bankruptcy specifically?
Bankruptcy is going to require a filing fee, and I believe the current fee is $330 to file. There are a number of schedules and documents that have to be filled out. There are a number of other documents that you need to have in order to make sure all the schedules get filled out correctly. Before COVID hit, we used to do a lot of these in a clinic setting where we'd actually help people walk through filling it out themselves. Since COVID, that's been a little more difficult because we're not meeting face-to-face with folks, particularly folks in groups. So what we have been doing at our branch office in Scottsbluff, and I think this is true in other offices as well, is if you call the access line and say you have some debt problems, you need to talk to an attorney, they'll take some basic information from you, send it to us. If we, after talking with you, figure out the bankruptcy is the correct way to go for you, we will send you a packet, and that packet has a checklist with it. It has all the information in there that you're going to have. We have you collect the information, bring it back to our office. We have a Dropbox. Kendra actually does all the fill out the form stuff for me. And then I will help you with what's called a 341 hearing, which those are all being done by telephone right now. That process is done, and then within about 2 months, you usually get your bankruptcy. So it really becomes dependent upon you and how quickly you can gather all the information that we need.
Okay, the next question is, can you talk a little bit about repairing credit scores?
Actually, it's funny. We got several questions about that. And so you have juiced us to make the next course to be, how do we repair your credit scores? You know, as I told you earlier in this slideshow, that a lot of the stuff we talked about is very broadly touched upon tonight because we're trying to identify those things where we can take that deeper dive. And that deeper dive is about those credit scores. Now, that being said, well, we sent everybody a collection handbook as part of the materials for this that was prepared by Legal Aid of Nebraska. That collection handbook has a lot of information about things you can do to correct and fix, repair, if you will, your credit score. But thank you for the questions, because we're going to use that to develop another class that we hopefully will be putting on within a month or two.
What if someone should get sued? What should they do?
All right, if somebody gets sued, and this is my own little pet peeve, I know you owe the money. I get it. I understand that you don't have a defense, but don't just let them take a judgment against you. It makes it so much more difficult. What you need to do is file a piece of paper with the court that says, I deny everything they say. File that and then call legal aid so we can talk to you and help you figure out something to do. A lot of times, all you're trying to do is slow the court process down. Because if you can slow it down, a lot of times you can negotiate a resolution that doesn't end up with a judgment against you. If you end up with a judgment against you, then you end up with garnishments. You end up with garnishments, your life goes upside down. I mean, it's just crazy. So if you get sued, just file a piece of paper that says, I disagree with everything they say, sign it, get it filed with the court, and call legal aid right away so we can get in there and get help for you. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore it.
That leads into my next question. What should you do if you have a garnishment?
So if you have a garnishment and you're able to make ends meet still, I would contact the person who got the garnishment, and you can still try to negotiate it away. It's much more difficult because now there's a judgment. And that is why it's so important not to just roll over and let them take a default judgment against you. But you know, the other thing is a bankruptcy will stop a garnishment in its tracks. There are ways to get money back that's been paid in within 6 months of filing bankruptcy. So depending on your personal circumstances and situation, we may take a bankruptcy to stop all those garnishments. It's important that you call the access line, talk to somebody there, and they will get you to the right office from there.
Now, my next question that we've received, I think a lot of us feel the same way. What should we do when we can't meet our minimum payments and our debt is so suffocating that it just seems like there's no way to get out from underneath of it, and trying to figure out a manageable way to handle
sure,
that?
and that's kind of what I do in that circumstance is I sit down and I talk with you. We look at everything. I mean, sometimes just having a fresh set of eyes on your financial situation helps you, because somebody might see something and say, "Oh, look, we could do this, or we could fix that." If it is so suffocating and there's just no way to get you upright with the world, probably the best thing to do is look at bankruptcy again. But bankruptcy should always be the last solution, and we should explore all the different ways that we can get around those if we can. You know, I think if you go back and you remind the first slide that I talked about, the financial self-test, right? Mm-hmm. If you are you've diagnosed and your expenses are ahead of your income, yeah, you got a problem. We need to talk to you. We need to sit down and see if we can figure out a way to get you upright with the world and back going. And if we can't, we take bankruptcy and give you a fresh start. By the way, one of the things I neglected to say, part of the bankruptcy process is the bankruptcy court will require that you take a budgeting class. And the bankruptcy court will require that you take some other financial planning classes as part of a condition to get your bankruptcy.
Sure. Talking about credit cards a little bit, will credit card companies work with you to lower your interest rates and payments?
Generally speaking, credit card companies don't have to, so they're not going to. But that doesn't mean all of them won't. You know, all you can do, there's usually a customer service number on that card bill that you get. Call that number and ask. I often used to tell my kids, look, the worst thing that somebody can tell you is no. So just ask. And if the worst that can happen is they say no, that's the worst that can happen. You might get a surprise and they might say, well, what's your situation? Well, I got laid off because of COVID-19 and I haven't worked for 4 months and I don't know what to do. They may give you a grace period. Now that grace period's a trick because they're going to continue to add interest to your credit card, but understand that, you know, they still may work with you. Everybody nationwide is so struggling with COVID and its after effects, and the economy is teetering on the precipice. and nobody wants to be the person to push the thing off the precipice. So take the time, or precipice, take the time to make those calls and ask, explain the situation, and see if they're willing to work with you. Some of them do. Not, I don't want to get your hopes up, but some of them do.
Okay, can you talk a little bit more about student loans, and are student loans dischargeable in bankruptcy?
Okay, so student loans, that's another one that probably deserves its own class. And politically, we don't know what's going to happen with student loans right now. The conventional wisdom a year ago was that student loans were not dischargeable, and federal student loans were not dischargeable in bankruptcy. We have recently been seeing a lot of decisions involving people who have hardship and are able to prove that hardship in court. In fact, one of our own attorneys here at Legal Aid of Nebraska recently got a discharge of a student loan debt for a client based on some health problems the person was having, and the fact that the person just wasn't making enough money and hadn't made enough money to discharge these loans. They've been trying and trying and trying, and they finally just couldn't do it. The Department of Education actually fought us on it, and God bless Lee, she got her done, and the discharge was made today. I think it was today. I know the order just recently came out. So, you know, we got that done for somebody. So just because you have a student loan, don't despair. It still may be dischargeable. You need to talk to a lawyer to figure that out.
Sure. Okay, I'm just gonna put a little segue in here. If you have any other questions, please feel free in the question and answer box below to send those in. I just have a couple more that I'm going to ask, but I want to give everybody the opportunity to send them in if they have questions. And if I haven't typed out an answer, or if Mike hasn't already answered those. One of my final questions is, what if you're past due, or what if your debt is past due rent?
And that's a huge problem right now. Again, with COVID happening, I'm sure you're all seeing in the news that we're expecting evictions to explode nationwide. That's also going to happen here in Nebraska. The key really is to be talking with your landlord early and often. What the landlords haven't yet figured out is if they evict all these folks, there's no folks to come in and take their places. So it's better for them to work with you. You remember the slide I talked about half a loaf? Talk with the landlord about what you might be able to do to try and get money back. Ask the landlord if he knows of any jobs out there that you can do because you've been laid off from your job. You know, it's all about communication, and it's all about relationships. And it's about trying to figure out how to get back upright with the world. We might see something out of Congress in the next 2 weeks that helps. We may not. We might see something out of Congress in 3 months from now that pays back a bunch of back rent. We just don't know. The other thing is there is still CARES money available. CARES money is the money that was set aside with the first big stimulus project. So you can contact folks and see if that CARES money is still available to help you catch up your rent with your landlord. Some counties have other options and other little pots of money set aside to help with those things. What I would do is, again, call the access line. They have the information for all that stuff. They should be able to aim you in the right direction to get help with your current past due rent.
And the final question I have right now, unless anybody sends anything else in, is what advice would you give for youth and young adults about managing their debt early on and getting that under control essentially early on? First,
I tell them don't get in debt. And I also know that's kind of silly, but you got to make the plan, right? You got to take your income, you got to take your spending sheet. You know, maybe you got 2 roommates and you're sharing an apartment. The 3 of you, you got to make sure everybody's gotten their pay to make that payment for the rent each month, right? You don't want to be the person paying for the other 2 people in the room. So you need to sit down, come up with a budget plan. Again, I'm a Pinterest junkie. I love Pinterest. You can put almost anything you want in the search box in Pinterest on budgets or on finances or anything, and you will get all sorts of good information that helps you out. You get good printables. I mean, if you don't like the ones we sent you, you can find other ones you can use. But the biggest advice you can give to a kid is try not to get in debt at all. Take your money, put your money to work. You know, especially that first job, man, you're rich, you're loaded, you can go spend your money on anything, and you do. and all of a sudden one day you turn around and you're like, oh my God, what just happened? Tell you another personal story on me. When I first got married, I went into the Army. 6 months in, we got upside down in our bank account. Well, when you're in the Army, that's not a good thing. They don't like it when you're bouncing checks around the post. Yeah, I would think I was 26 or something, and newly married and newly had a paycheck. It was great. You know, I just got out of law school where I just accumulated student loan debt. And went in and talked to my boss. My boss grinned at me and he says, how long you been married? I said, about 8 months. He says, that's about right. And I just started laughing. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, everyone I know, Mike, gets in that position when they first get married, because all of a sudden you got combined incomes, you got all this extra money, and you just don't pay attention. And I learned at a very young or mid-20 age, you got to pay attention. So you got to sit down, you got to figure out what's coming in, and you put your money to work because it's still your money.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've been going about 50 minutes. I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope you found it helpful. If you didn't, please tell us why so we can fix it. And I hope to see you in the next few months when we talk about student loan debt and we talk about how to repair your credit. And now we'll turn over to Megan Moslander, who is one of the muckety mucks at Legal Aid.
Well, I'm not a muckety muck. Kendra did, and I might have missed it. Did we get the question answered about does it hurt your credit score to transfer credit card balances to new credit cards?
I'm not.
Must have missed that one.
It was on the Q&A.
Let me look for her. I might have missed it. We'll just go ahead with it now.
Okay.
So the question is,
yep. Does it hurt your credit score to transfer credit card balances to new credit cards that offer 0% interest rates for an extended period of time?
and the easy answer is it depends. If you transfer to the new card, you still have the debt on your report, right? But the old card, if you close it, this is the weirdest thing about credit in the world. If you close that old card, that will hurt your credit score. If you leave the old card open and stick it in an envelope and stick it in the back of your sock drawer and you never touch it again, that will actually help your credit score because you'll have credit that you're not using. And your new card is saving you interest because you're not paying any interest for the first 6 months or whatever the terms are, right? Now, what you got to be careful of is at the end of that 6-month period, what happens to that interest? Does it stay as low as the card you currently have, or does it hit you for 24.9 or 20, some crazy numbers? So you want to check all the terms. Just don't look for the short-term fix. Look for that long-term effects. But that should, as long as you don't close the other card, that actually should help your credit somewhat.